Welcome to Gigging, Everything in the Sharing Economy. In this podcast, we give you news, views, and predictions about the sharing, gig, and circular loop economies, which is expected to grow to $35 billion by 2025. In the first episode of Gigging, Everything in the Sharing Economy, we just talked about the future of the world's economy as it related to the impact that gigging or the gig economy would have on your everyday life. And we touched on a few sectors. But in this show, I want to go a little deeper. I want to focus in on transportation and talk about how this market is evolving and what the future is going to look like for those of you who are now playing on the fringes of the shared economy. You probably have taken an Uber. You may have taken a Lyft ride. And that may have been convenient to you relative to taxis, which are pretty much the same thing without an app. But that's as far as many of us have gone in terms of thinking about changes in the economy driven by this sharing motif. Well, bigger changes are coming, and you've probably heard about a few of them on the night news when they talked about artificial intelligence or driverless vehicles or autonomous vehicles. Elon Musk, Google, Apple, everyone trying to get in on the bandwagon to see who can conquer this market first with a driverless vehicle. Well, I'm going to take a little bit of a different bent on how this market is looking in some of the new drivers that are pushing it forward. Now, the first big entry that some of us have seen because we live in bigger cities are scooters. Now, why did this excite me? Because I had a apple red Honda scooter when I was in high school. And it was the sharpest little scooter you've ever seen. Took me everywhere, and it only took 35 cents to fill the tank. And I'd get north of 45 miles a gallon off of that little scooter. But now you're starting to see those same types of scooters pop up in congested cities in the U.S. where they have been prevalent mostly in congested cities throughout Asia, Southeast Asia, and parts of Europe. And some big money players are jumping into this market, namely Google. Google has plopped down $250 million into an e-scooter company called Lime, which puts their pre-money value somewhere $250 million short of $1 billion. That's not bad for a little scooter. Now, these guys have a pretty simple model. Buy up a bunch of scooters, put them in a city, make them convenient and easy to unlock, and charge as little as 15 cents per minute for people to use them. So the app gives you control to find and unlock and pay for. And at 15 cents a minute, you can have yourself a pretty cool joyride through the congested cities of places like San Francisco, New York, and LA. And the demand for these scooters have been huge for just those reasons. They are fun, it's very cheap, and you can get places that cars can't take you when things get busy. When I was working in LA, I was literally 2 exits down from Disney World. And when I wanted to go there, I would have to give myself a 3-hour head start. Scooters don't have those kinds of restrictions. Even in my hometown of Selma, where I rode my scooter, I got around traffic, zigged and zagged in and out of the different lanes, or just rolled down the middle of the road and made my way to the front of the line. Now, Lime believes that this sort of demand can turn this scooter market into $1 billion market in less than a couple of years. They've already reported 55,000 trips in the first 3 weeks of operation in San Diego. Now, I can believe that. lived in San Diego, and San Diego is another way of saying buy a scooter and ride me on the beach. That's what it translates to. So that meant at the rate that I mentioned earlier, 15 cents a minute, and the average amount of time that people rode those scooters, which, their revenue worked out to about $70,000 a month. That's not bad. When they scale that model in San Diego, they think they can get somewhere north of 300,000 rides per month in just San Diego. That would equate somewhere shy of 4 million rides per year in just that city. So if they replicated that around the country in cities the size of San Diego or above, they think they could get somewhere north of 250 million rides. With the average revenue of $2.25 per ride, because people are taking trips for about 15 minutes, that's not bad. That's a $750 million top line number for a company that's letting you rent scooters. That money is going to come off the back of somebody. And that is probably going to come off the back of the people who are trying to share bikes. Now, Uber, Lyft, and a couple of these other companies recently invested in bike sharing, and they've started to shift gears and look into the e-scooter market. Why? Would I prefer to pedal in San Francisco, the hills of San Francisco, or look really cool on a scooter, not having to struggle up those hills? I think I'd go for the latter. So the success of the e-scooter market, in my view, is going to come at the demise of the bike sharing market. And you're seeing some of the demise of this market already occur in China with companies like Mobike, which have agreed to be acquired, and a few of the other companies cutting back their orders for bikes because as much as 20% of those bikes that are currently already out there for use have been abandoned or just left in places that aren't the racks where they normally would be used to serve the public, shows that there's an oversupply for the demand for the bike. Now, there's risk of that occurring here, too, with the e-scooter, but I think less so than with the bike where human power is required to get you from point A to point B. And for all of you who've lived in places like D.C., where you have tons of delivery people who ride bikes to drop off court filings, to make deliveries between buildings, you could see how this scooter can play a role in helping the gig economy evolve. Amazon, Deliveroo, other players who are building their futures around same-day delivery will soon have an army of people who can make deliveries while renting e-scooters from the likes of Google. So for no capital, I can rent a scooter and make deliveries and get in the game. Not a bad way to seed the market and solve some of the last mile problems for these delivery companies who want same-day delivery. So like you've seen in China, where you have companies now developing apps that have multiple dimensions to them. Rent my scooter. Oh, by the way, as soon as you rent the scooter, I'm going to give you the opportunity to make money. Deliver this package as soon as you rent my scooter, and those first 15 minutes are free. Once you make the delivery, oh, by the way, the app lets you deposit your money straight into an account, a bank account, or to take that money and pay a bill. An electric bill, a water bill. So whenever you need services, you just jump on a scooter, work, and pay your bills with the excess going into your account. So this scooter thing really excites me because I think in larger cities, you're going to see an explosion of scooters creating commerce for large players like Amazon. So what am I predicting? Yeah, Amazon, McDonald's, and other players are going to put some cash into the market in order to be able to dictate some of these terms of how their needs are built into the apps that drive the e-scooter market. And for me, for the users, it's going to create some great opportunities without any capital investments. Kind of like what Uber was trying to do a couple of years ago with the car rental companies and creating opportunities for people to get cars on a day-to-day basis in order to drive for Uber. Except for this has a lower threshold, lower risk, but bigger upside for the people who would ride the scooters. Speaking of Ubers, Uber and Lyft have built a great business pushing the taxi cab companies out of the way and creating a better model because it gives the consumer control over the ride experience. You know who's picking you up, you know when they're going to show up, you know where they're going to pick you up. If they don't see you, they can give you a call. There's a lot more control over the experience. The Uber model is working, but it's adding net new cars to the system. How do we address the excess capacity that's still embedded in the system with cars that people own? And that's really the crux of the issue. How do we transition to a full sharing economy model when we have latent, pent up capacity in the system? What do I mean? Last week, I took Uber 3 times in the city where I live, just out of convenience, because I wanted to go and conduct some interviews, and I wanted to be picked up and brought to another spot where some entrepreneurs were going to be speaking, and then back to my house. Now think about this. I own a car. So while I was taking Uber, my car sat idle. That's pent up capacity that could be used in the system. I was taking Uber, and if that trip was that convenient, that could be my model all the time. But I choose to retain a car. How do we change that model? How do we get the capacity out of my idle car and push me closer to using Uber all the time? People with cars in their hometowns will take their own vehicle. So that creates a barrier for further growth from the Ubers until you figure out how to tap that unused capacity in those existing vehicles in the market. I think the transitionary step is going to be peer-to-peer sharing. Now, Zipcar had an interesting model in that they were going to provide you cars that you could pick up in convenient locations. But what if you could just pick up any car in any location where you were at? And that's what a company called Turo Go is hoping to do with the hardware that they're deploying in their cars that allows owners to remotely lock and unlock their cars and automatically track mileage and geolocate their car. So it makes the experience of owning a car smarter and the experience of sharing it safer. So Turo Go's app really improves the customer experience and opens up more of the existing fleet of cars that are owned by people up for sharing, giving them the potential for revenue when the car is idle. I drive to work. I have Turo Go's installation on my car. Someone could drive that when I'm at work, return it before I get off. And while I'm working, my car is making money. So Turo Go hopes to accelerate their mission with this new technology of putting 1 billion cars to better use. And when I think about that, relative to the Uber model, either where people are purchasing new cars and putting a new carbon footprint into the environment, Turo Go is allowing existing cars to be used in the market, shared, and still giving the original owner the convenience of its use and creating a capacity model that's better utilized because of that arrangement. Now, if future cars come off the assembly line with that kind of technology, we're going to have a world where you have ownership to an asset that's creating you revenue whenever you turn the light green or red, go or don't go, where people can rent your car. And you have some forward-thinking manufacturers who are looking at this model and saying that's the evolution of the transportation market. From a car perspective, if we ever expect to get to a fully deployed driverless world, we need to go through a world where people share their cars when they're not using them, to get all the existing capacity working within the system so that we can model the world that has no drivers. Now, Turo Go already has 6 million users, and they've completed 4.5 million trips using this technology. With this peer-to-peer model, you would transform even rural areas into communities that would fully utilize cars. So the guy I saw, construction worker yesterday, who was working to stop for lunch at a Wendy's and then stopped again there when he wrapped up the day and started walking, I presumed, back to his place of residence. When I passed him twice and saw that he had walked at least a couple of miles, he would have been able to tap into a vehicle that would have made his work day and round trip easier. And you can see how much easier that would be, especially in markets where Uber and Lyft are not available, those rural communities. So it would bring ride availability to rural communities because it would be cheap and you'd have available supply in a market where Uber and Lyft may not work. Now, if this model takes hold, everything associated with the car will become transactionalized, including the insurance. And there are 3 or 4 companies already out there now in the insurance market that are selling trip insurance. You're going between point A and point B, they'll insure that. When you're done, it expires. So what will Uber and Lyft become as this peer-to-peer market evolves? I think they're going to evolve into quasi-government agencies. Yes, quasi-government agencies that will manage the multimodal travel within those cities. Uber has already launched what they call Uber Pool in Sydney, Australia. And with Sydney Pool, you get an opportunity to share a car with someone else. Now, for many years when I worked with one of the big consulting firms, I had that option as well. When I took a car to the airport, if I were with one of the limousine services, I could have a $100 trip to the airport or a $50 trip to the airport if I agreed to allow them to pick up other passengers en route to the airport. And so Uber is launching a service similar to that, where you can pay a cheaper fare if you will allow other people to share that car with you. And the discount can be as much as 50% versus a single car, single person booking. That's exciting because it sets the stage for Uber and Lyft to manage bus lines or bus trips that would essentially allow them to take and aggregate orders and plan out trip routes based on daily demand. So car sharing to bus sharing allows them to think bigger and operate for cities, those bus lines and car lines, to move people more efficiently from point A to point B, which would give then Uber and Lyft the ability to plan your entire trip out across all of the different transportation platforms that they will be managing for every city. You may start in a car, transfer to a bus, and then to the train, all at one price that Uber or Lyft maintains and runs for that city. And if you work within that model, you may also be a part of a crowdsourced solution that delivers packages in addition to people as part of that infrastructure. So the future, as we shift in transportation and shift with players like Uber and Lyft, is very exciting because the efficiency of the assets in place would go through the roof. And theoretically, if they're doing it as a quasi-government agency, our taxes should go down, or at least not go up, right? When that infrastructure is in place, then driverless cars and trucks and buses all make sense, because you need the central hub that controls the majority of the trips under one management platform. And then you need players like Turo who will be interoperable with that platform so that your car can speak to that transportation hub, know the best routes, and from a security perspective, have the protocols to avoid collisions. Pretty cool, huh? Freight, I think, also will continue to move in a P2P or peer-to-peer model as well. You got some interesting players that are emerging, that are pushing this, and that are squeezing more capacity out of the existing system, opening up more opportunities. Players like CarryMate. This is a community of human couriers delivering each other's goods when they travel. Now, the airports aren't always so cool about that because they want you to carry your bags that you own and not necessarily goods for other people. But within CarryMate, you have this group of trusted individuals who, within this P2P platform, deliver packages when they travel. You got players like Cargo 42 that are working with shippers and drivers and making sure that the return trips of 18-wheelers are full en route back to the distribution center. So they give them the optimal trip path back to pick up and drop off merchandise to make extra money en route back to their distribution center. And then you have ZenFast, a crowdsourced platform that allows drivers, if they're making a trip, to pick up packages and drop off in the cities where they're headed. So those models, I think, like what we've seen in ride sharing, are going to force the same sort of evolution that gives us those hubs that will eventually create the efficiency models that drive the future economy. And I'm looking forward to it because I'm tired of driving. The future is going to be interesting, and it's going to unlock a lot more opportunities for younger people and for people who are today shut in because they don't have transportation. That's going to produce, to me, some more explosive growth if you have the intellectual capital to contribute to this new economy. Exciting stuff. Well, thank you for listening to the future of transportation on Gigging, Everything in the Sharing Economy. This has been Mark Anthony Peterson. If you can't get enough of this stuff, follow me online at Gorillapreneur. Guerrilla, preneur, like an entrepreneur, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And let's continue the conversation there. Until the next episode where we look into the future, keep gigging.